everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm an LCSW here in New York. Thank you so much for joining me today and for just having this shared space together. I'm feeling very yoga teacher today. Um, Anyways, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be talking about kind of my own social work journey, why I got into social work, and how I became a social worker. So if you are first interested in just my own specific journey, or you're interested in becoming a social worker, I will really try to answer those questions and kind of share my own experience today. I think this is also just a good episode because a lot of you, the podcast is growing and it's very exciting to see. But I kind of just wanted to share more about my background and experience and how I've gotten to where I am right now, in hopes of kind of just sharing. I know whenever I have guests on, I always have a portion of the episode where they share their own social work journey and how they got to where they are. And so I think this is a good refresher for people who are maybe new to this podcast, new listeners, to get to know me a little bit better and to also see my particular path in social work and see if that's something that resonates with you. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, follow, share the podcast with a fellow social worker. Um, Also, don't forget if you're a social worker or new grad and you want to be a mentor in the Social Work Neighborhood Mentorship Program, it's a free mentorship program for social workers and social work students across the US. I'll have my link below to apply to be a mentor. So we're looking for mentors. Our mentee enrollment opens April 15th. And so please, if you're wanting to give back, we don't ask much, maybe like an hour a month, an hour every other week. It really depends on what your mentee's needing, but we're really building out the social work neighborhood, and it's become a really exciting national mentorship program for social workers. So feel free to check that out too. Anyways, let's dive in. So the whole point of this episode, like I said, is first the why and then the how. Um, and for my story and my experience, they definitely go together in conjunction with each other. Throughout my childhood and my life, I was always very actively involved in my church. I grew up Christian Protestant, still am. Um, I've definitely deconstructed a lot of my upbringing, a lot of the white saviorism that was a part of my um, religion growing up. But at least with my church in particular, it was always extremely service oriented, which is something that I've really appreciated about it is it's not just talking about a lot of stuff. It's not just talking about loving your neighbor. It's actually, boots on the ground. Let's show up for the people in our community and really do some service work here. And so that's something that has always been a part of my life. As I got into middle school and high school, I did a lot of volunteering projects and I was a part of Key Club for volunteering and doing a lot of community work and through honor societies and things like that. And throughout high school, I always knew I wanted to go into a profession in helping others. I had a stint where I considered going to fashion school for a little bit. Um, like I just considered a lot of things because I loved everything. And I think that was something that was really hard for me is there's so many things I find a lot of joy in. I'm one of those people who's definitely a lifelong learner. I just find most things very interesting and I love learning new skills and new things. And so I had just a lot that I could do, a lot that I wanted to do. I thought about going to school for English or for teaching, for archaeology, for things like that. I'm honestly still considering getting a certificate in archaeology, because that's a hobby. That's something I'm really interested in. I love history, English literature, and English in particular. Writing, creative writing, that's always something that's been a huge hobby and passion of mine throughout my life, and something that I also did really well at. Um, so there's just so many paths that I could have taken. I also grew up in a family that had a lot of nurses, and so because of my kind of natural draw to more helping professions as well as ultimately I knew as much as this other stuff was very fun and kind of passion projects in terms of stable employment, that wasn't necessarily um, stuff that aligned with that goal to have financially stable employment. And so I was like, well, let's think about some helping professions. And I started applying to nursing schools. And I got into the nursing program at my local community college, which is a very competitive program. In in the application process, they only accepted 7 graduating high school seniors, and the rest were like people returning to school or other people. And so it was a huge accomplishment to get into the program. It was funny though, because looking back, I'm like, why did I ever think that was a good idea? Because as much as I've loved science, and science is something I find really fascinating, and I do love kind of going down my own rabbit holes, learning about different concepts and exploring different things. And I do have a fascination with anatomy and physiology and biology and all that stuff I really enjoy. It it was never something that I was as passionate as other things. I still gravitated towards other stuff. And that's exactly what happened when I was ultimately in nursing school. I started nursing school. I fully committed to the program. I lived at home with my parents because the nursing program is only a 15-minute drive. Um, and honestly, from the jump, the vibes were bad. Vibes were bad. I'm about to say something that is, in fact, a stereotype, and I want everyone to give me some grace. But in my personal experience, there's a very real mean girl to nurse pipeline. It's not a great pipeline, and maybe I'm just biased. And unfortunately, I'm also starting to see that happen in social work. Whether that's been happening, I'm not sure. But I've seen some people I've known throughout my life who have been quite cruel people and just like bullying kind of people, and they become social workers. Like it's definitely a parallel I'm seeing, and I'm not loving that. Um, but it was something I really experienced with my peers and with my professors in particular is there was just not a personality alignment. My professors just were um not diplomatic. They weren't compassionate or really helpful in their approach, and it was one of those things where it took my desire to learn away. And that's as someone who loves learning and really loves challenging myself. And again, I love a textbook. I've kept all my textbooks from college, even classes that were like gen eds, like my geology class, because I like returning to that stuff and I like learning and refreshing my memory. um, it was a lot of these professors that made me hate it, honestly. And so my first semester was a big adjustment into college. It was a very competitive, difficult nursing program, and I was not doing well. I think in that program in particular, you had to have a B in order to pass, and I had a lot of C's in all my nursing classes. In my gen eds, I was doing really well, but in the nursing program classes, I was not doing well. And it was really disappointing because it's my first semester. I had come off from being like a really excelling straight A student in high school and throughout most of my life. And school usually came pretty easy to me. It was usually just pretty easy, although I loved studying. It wasn't one of those things where like I never studied and then it was so easy. Like I enjoyed learning. And so I was really faced with this difficulty of like, I really hate this. I was crying all the time. I was really stressed out, but also feeling I wasn't doing enough. And I was carving out time to study, and I said I was studying, but I really looking back, I wasn't actually studying in any kind of way that was helpful. I was often distracted and I was ultimately procrastinating and avoiding any kind of studying because I just didn't want to. And that's very telling is how you spend your time. And it was just at a point where I was like, I don't like this. And I kind of reached a point where I was like, I want to change my major. I brought this up to my parents because I'd consistently just been like really crying and upset and stressed. And I was like, I don't like this. This isn't what I want to do. Um, I talked to my parents about it, and their initial reaction was very overwhelmed and stressed. And I mean, talking about it now, to them, when I said I want to change majors, they kind of interpreted it as, oh my gosh, she's like dropping out of school and all. Like, so they had a really big reaction. I was told just stick it out, just get your nursing degree, you can go back later. And I'm like, that's insane. That's really crazy. All I want to do is change my major. The vast majority of people, like 87% of college students, change their major at some point. Like, this is not a crazy thing. Also, it's my first semester of college. Like, of course I'm changing my major. So it was just a little crazy. It was also my grades were so bad that I lost my full ride scholarship for the nursing program, which was crazy. Like that was such a huge failure for me. Um, and so I basically reached this point where I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. I don't want to be in this nursing program at all. I just have no passion for it. When I was in my nursing clinicals, I found myself sitting with my patients and avoiding doing any of the actual nursing work I was there to do. And instead, I would just kind of do like the therapy work in some way of just like, I would really just sit with my patients and I'd get to know them and they tell me their life story and we talk about like their family relationships and dynamics. And it was just like really, really beautiful human moments that I found myself doing rather than the nursing work I was supposed to be doing. Like, tell me to do a full body assessment, and there's no way on earth I would do it. I just didn't want to do anything. I was just dragging my feet the entire way. So ultimately, what I came to is I want to leave this nursing program, but I want to leave knowing that I didn't just leave because I couldn't do it. I don't just want to leave because I'm not doing well. I want to make sure I'm in a spot where I'm doing well, I'm taking it seriously, I'm doing the work, I'm following through, and then that's when I want to be sure that it's the right move for me to leave because I know I don't want to be confused and think that I'm leaving because I can't do it and that I'm just running away from something that's hard. So I shifted things around. I took it very seriously and I drastically improved my grades. My professors were really excited for me. They were just like, we've seen how much you've grown in such a short period. Like you're doing incredibly well. Awesome. And so once I got my grades up in the second semester, I was like, okay, well, I still don't like it. I still don't like it. So second semester, I dropped all my nursing classes. I finished out like microbiology and like an A&P class, which I really enjoyed those. Those were great. Um, and then I started in my social work classes. And when I tell you, which in community college level, I was getting my associates in human services, and then which we'll find out in a second, then I'll transfer on to a SUNY school to finish out my bachelor's. Um, so I was in an intro to human services class, and at this point, I'd never really heard of social work. I think I started talking to other people and like just through peers, I was just like, oh, like a human services program. Like there's a lot of nursing students who are leaving nursing are going into human services. Like what's this all about? And honestly, at that point, I had never really heard about social work. I had never really heard about human services. I didn't really know what it meant. I mean, like I think for a lot of people, we just associate with like child protective services or like I knew of the school social worker, but for my entire district, we had one social worker for elementary, middle, and high school. It was a small district, but that's still thousands of kids. And it was like I still didn't like we didn't really know what he did or why he was there, what's going on, and like the whole thing was just very odd. Um, I knew about social workers from like when my cousin was in foster care and ultimately adopted, like things like that was just how I understood social workers. And so it wasn't very much. So I took my first Intro to Human Services class, and my first ever class, within the first 5 minutes, I have my professor, um, Catherine, who is teaching. And I also just think there was a way better personality alignment. The personalities and overall vibe and attitude of my human services professors compared to my nursing professors was so vastly different. You could tell why they were social workers and into human services. They were so much more empathetic and compassionate, and it was just a way better personality fit. And I realized that within the first 5 minutes of this Intro to Human Services class, it clicked. And I was like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. Like I'm like this, and it was such an affirming point for me because I'm like, this was such a good call. Like I was immediately so excited, so passionate. And I just dove in and I excelled. And so when so I finish out, I get my associates in human services. During that time, I do an internship with that at the associates level. It's not really an internship, it's more of like a shadowing experience, honestly. I do that at a foster care agency because at that point, my whole interest is child welfare. A lot of the experience I've had throughout high school was very child focused. I did a lot of like teaching Sunday school classes and volunteering in the nursery and a lot of the other volunteer. I did a lot of babysitting growing up. Like my focus has always been very child-centered, and so I kind of thought I'd take the child welfare approach. And preventing child abuse and all of that is something that's always been, and I would hope for most people, very important. And so that was something that I was really passionate about. Um, so I did that, and then I transferred to SUNY Fredonia, which I went to Jamestown Community College, which is also a SUNY school. I lived at home with my parents. I commuted to college, and then what a lot of people do is they go to JCC, and then they transfer to SUNY Fredonia because it's the closest SUNY school. You can transfer there, and then 2 years later get your bachelor's. And it's also often like the affordable route to do. And so that's exactly what I did. I transferred into their BSW program, and I did great. I excelled there. Um, I honestly can't remember if I had any. Oh, you know what? I just looked this up. I think did, I got my bachelor's in social work with a minor in counseling psychology, I think, because I had so many extra credits and everything. I was able to get a minor as well. I didn't want a double major. I looked into that. But I was like, I'm good. I was a research assistant. My time at SUNY Fredonia is honestly some of the fondest memories I have. I absolutely like that's really those 2 years was like such a fulfilling college experience. I lived with my grandparents then, so even though SUNY Fredonia was still close to where my parents lived, it was 45 minutes away, and my grandparents lived 15 minutes away. So I moved in with my grandparents for those 2 years, which was such a great experience, and I'm so glad I got to have that time with them. Um, I was working full time as a direct support professional. I was working in residential homes for adults with developmental disabilities. I was working constantly. I was a full-time BSW student. I was doing my internship at a child advocacy center, many hours of the week. I was also volunteering. I was on call with the disaster action team with the Red Cross. I was volunteering with my church. I was um, volunteering at another local like social services organization. They did a lot of donation-based work and getting people set up with furniture and volunteer experience so that for like workforce development stuff. So I volunteered there a lot. So my time at Fredonia was absolutely insane because I was just working constantly. Like and this is not something I would recommend. I I have appreciation for that time now because first I just really loved it. I was really like peak at taking care of myself. I was still taking care of myself physically. I was still getting sleep, although that wasn't very consistent. That was a time where like I didn't really make a lot of friends at JCC, but I did at Fredonia, and I was feeling like really good with like a solid friend group that I had. Like all these things were just feeling good. And then like academically and professionally, I was having like really good experiences. I was really actively involved in a lot of extracurricular activities and clubs and honor societies and organizations. Like I had a very full life. And it was also just like that close community feel of it that I really, really loved. Um, it's making me emotional thinking about it, which is crazy. I did not realize how meaningful that time of my life is to me. Um, so that was really great. And it was during that time I spoke to one of my professors who was my advisor, and we started talking about grad schools. And I was like, I know I want to get my master's in social work at this point. It's like kind of necessary for most things. Also at this time, I did not know I wanted to be a therapist. I kind of fell into being a therapist. I kind of thought, go to grad school. And even, when I went to grad school, I got my master's in social work with a specialization in working with children, youth, and families. Um, and so even my specialization wasn't like a focus in mental health. I think the other focus would probably be like mental health and disabilities, something like that. Like a lot of the people I went to school with who were becoming therapists or clinical social workers were going like the definitely more specific clinical mental health route, where my focus was children, youth, and families. Also, after having my experience at my internship working at the Child Advocacy Center, I was continuing that child welfare route. And then from there, I just deeply, deeply loved my internship, and became really passionate about forensic social work. And I was like, I think this is maybe what I want to pursue. I didn't even realize that was a specialty in grad school, or else I probably would have done it. But again, I didn't really have a specific plan because I'd never been to grad school before. Nobody in my family had been to grad school before. I was kind of just figuring it out on my own, and nobody I knew was a social worker either, except for like my professors and everything. And so I just had like limited information on what I should be doing, like what path I should be taking for my career goals. Because at that point I thought I'm going to be a child welfare social worker, I'll be a forensic social worker, maybe I was really interested in like working in the court system, and supporting survivors of crime and their families. And so that was a big passion of mine. And then I had this professor, my advisor, we were talking about grad school options, and he was basically like, I wanted to move to New York City at the time, so I was only looking at schools in New York. Um, and ever since I was very little, I had always had this standard of wanting to go to an Ivy League school. I think we can get into the weeds about Ivy League institutions and all of the crap about them and like elitism and all this stuff, and I think all those things are very valid. It Holding all of that did not take away from like this innate desire that I've since worked through, that I wanted to prove myself, and getting into an Ivy League school and being able to go to a place like Columbia just to me felt like I could finally prove myself to the people in my life, to kind of be like, look, I'm smart, I'm enough, I'm all of these things. We're not going to get into the weeds of my psychology about all of this. I've since worked through all this stuff in therapy, but at the time, that's what I was experiencing. And it was my advisor who without question was like, Laura, you could go to Columbia. What are you talking about? And I just remember looking at him like, really? Are you are you serious? And again, it's making I don't know why I'm getting so emotional this episode. It's just so much reminiscing and nostalgia. Oh my goodness. Um, but it was just so meaningful, and I'm like, are you serious? Like what? And he was like, 100%, I have no doubt. And so I committed to that. I applied to NYU, Columbia, Fordham, and Stony Brook University on Long Island. I got into all of them. At first at Columbia, I was waitlisted. This is an important part of my story, is I was waitlisted and I was so nervous. I talked to my advisor about it again. I was like, I got waitlisted at Columbia. I don't know. Like, and he was just like, that's normal. Like, it's okay. Just give it some time. And so ultimately, I sent an email to the Columbia admissions team or whatever, and I basically just continued to fight for my spot. And I was like, I know I'm a good fit. This is also, I was continuing to add stuff to my resume. I sent them, I was like, oh, this is additional volunteer experience I had. But I basically sent them an email that really showed my intense interest, my passion for social work, why I was a good fit at Columbia, like ultimately kind of begging, like, please, please. And then a couple weeks later, I got my acceptance letter for Columbia, which, funnily enough, at that point, I had also gotten accepted at NYU, and I had fully registered for my classes at NYU. I was ready to begin my fall semester at NYU. And then I got my acceptance into Columbia, and literally immediately I'm sending that email saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be going to NYU." Oh my gosh, which is crazy. I would have liked NYU plenty. I think NYU also would have been a really great fit for me. I was really excited about going to NYU. But when your dream school comes a knockin', you take it. Like, doing, again, for better or for worse, for all the complexities and honestly the garbage of Ivy League elitism, at that time that was something that was deeply meaningful to me, and it had a lot packaged into it, and it was just like a no thoughts, I have to go to Columbia kind of thing. So I did. So ultimately, I graduated with honors. I got my bachelor's. I moved to the big city, and I found some roommates on Facebook Marketplace, and I had three roommates in a crappy apartment that kept having rodents and roaches, and that's really awesome. And we were all Columbia students, kind of cycled through quite a bit of roommates there. I was a honestly, it was a great neighborhood. I was in Morningside Heights, kind of it was in between like Harlem and the Upper West Side. And honestly, to this day, my favorite part of New York. I just think it's such a great spot, and I know that's just because I lived there and I have that experience. But yeah, I did the advanced standing program at Columbia. I got my master's in social work with a concentration in working with children, youth, and families. While I was at Columbia, I did my field practice at a community mental health clinic. I graduated in May 2020, in the height of COVID. And so, uh, honestly, at that time, I also just emotionally was not doing well. My depression had really spiked, my anxiety had really spiked. Living in the city during COVID. There was a few months at the beginning where I was working completely remotely at my internship. And I actually went home to live with my parents for a few months because they didn't want me in the city during that time. And so I actually had my Columbia graduation in my parents' living room because it was all remote. And I had my Columbia graduation robes, but I left them in my New York apartment. So that was a little sad. I still never to this day took pictures of my Columbia graduation robes. It is just a figment of my imagination at this point. So yeah, I did that. I will say this. I'm so I really appreciate my Columbia diploma and what an expensive diploma it is. I will say there is money in social work. And I'm not saying this to discount that, but I also just want to affirm if you're someone like me who had a lot of internalized stuff about your worth and your value and wanting to prove yourself to other people by going to a really established institution like an Ivy League school, I want to tell you right now, it doesn't matter. And it's something I needed to hear, because looking back, a degree is a degree, at least in social work. At least in social work, every university is accredited. Every university has to meet certain requirements and certain educational requirements with the CSWE, um, and with all these things. So at the end of the day, as long as you are going to an accredited university, it does not matter where you get your degree from. Nobody is going to care. Now I can say the cool thing of like, I lived in New York City, I went to Columbia. It doesn't matter. I got the same quality education as I would anywhere else. Um, I think going to Columbia was really valuable for my development, and my reflection, just like with disentangling whiteness and white supremacy and addressing my own internalized biases and on race and oppression and privilege. Like it was truly, and it was my first time really having to dive into like working through those things and being challenged on those things in a meaningful way. And that's something that has been so valuable to my work as a social worker that I don't think people really get enough of in school. And Columbia did a really good job, at least in my experience. Obviously, they've got work to do. But the social work program, the professors I had, um, and the peers I had, we all like it was just a really good environment of accountability and reflection and working through a lot of these like systems of oppression and how we've internalized a lot of those systems and oppression and supremacy. And so that was a part of my education that I'm eternally grateful for because I think the Columbia social work program and the professors in particular I had, because the social work program I know had its flaws and had a lot of things that needed to work on with actually integrating those things. Um, but I found it to be like really fundamental to my journey as a therapist and as a social worker. So that was great. I was in the advanced standing program. So again, I started, let's see, I graduated my BSW from Fredonia in May 2019. In July 2019, I started at Columbia in the advanced standing program and I graduated May 2020. Because I graduated in the height of COVID, I stayed on at my field practice, and they hired me as a therapist. So I was working at a community mental health clinic in Brooklyn, while I was still living in Morningside Heights. So the commute was insane. And At that time too, just like personally, I was dealing with PTSD. My anxiety was really bad. Like there was a lot of things. I had yet to start therapy at that point, and so my PTSD was really bad, and my anxiety was really bad. And then being on the C train at 8 o'clock at night, because I would get to the clinic at like 9 a.m. and I'd be there until 8 p.m. 5 days a week. I think honestly, I was only in person a couple days a week, but I was still working that much. And I can't do that now because I'm a single mom. But at that time, I was just a young girl living in New York City trying to make ends meet. And I was like, why not? I don't care that much. But it did start to wear on me, and my experience in community mental health was just overwhelming. And I love community mental health. I have some very exciting news that a future episode will be coming, and that I am returning to community mental health and leaving my practice. Oh, that's a little teaser. I'll have a full episode about that coming up. But working in community mental health was truly some of the most rewarding work I've ever done, and was also some of the most stressful and chaotic. Um, I think what made it hard, and I stand by this, is I would have stayed in it in spite of the crappy pay. I would have stayed in it had I had more support from the organization and from my supervisor, but there seemed to be some like just system structural issues within the organization where everything just felt very disjointed and disconnected. My supervisor was always very busy and overwhelmed, and you could tell like, that they were on their way to burnout, if not already. I felt very isolated. I didn't really feel part of the organization. I felt like I was just working for myself, and I was overwhelmed. I was a new therapist. At that point, like no one ever really teaches you how to be a therapist. Like it was nice in grad school. I had a few classes that were specific, like my motivational interviewing class. I had my cognitive behavior therapy class. Like I did have a few specific courses that were um oh my gosh, what's the word? Bonuses. I can't remember what the word is. And so those were really great because we mostly did like role playing therapy sessions in those moments. But it's still like it's different when you're with your peers, and it can feel uncomfy and hard, and you're maybe not showing up authentically as you do in like an actual therapy space. But that was valuable, but you still like you don't really know, like you have no approach, you have no like solid system at that point. Like it's kind of like, well, how do I actually be a therapist? Like what do I do? And I have such a gratitude for my clients at that time who just really stuck with me when I was just a young, let's see, if I graduated in 2020, I was 23. I was 23 when I started working as a therapist. I'm 28 now, and wow, what a different person I am, thank God. But I think about that time being a 23-year-old therapist fresh out of grad school, and I'm like, my clients really were patient with me because I probably said some insane things, or some things that were unhelpful, or I didn't know how to sit in discomfort, like all just new therapist Laura truly had no idea what was going on. And you know what? It was fine. You don't really have to know. You do end up figuring it out. It was just super scary. But I ultimately left community mental health not long after. I left in October 2021. So I stayed for a year and a half-ish after my graduation. And I ultimately left because I was burned out. I was overwhelmed. I wasn't making enough money. The commute was really bad. Um, and I was just dealing with a really, really high caseload. And a lot of my caseload was very high risk, high need people. Um, And I just, especially being a new graduate, I did not have the support I needed to feel confident and secure um, in working with my clients. And it was just, I didn't receive the support I needed to feel good about the work I was doing and to feel good about my client's safety, ultimately. Um, I was looking on Indeed, and I came across this listing for a therapist at a new group practice. And I'm looking at this listing and I'm like, is this a scam? this seems a little good to be too good to be true. And I'm reading it and it's like the pay was better. It was like $10 to $15 better. My pay at community mental health was $30 per session. Um, for like a 45-minute session. That's not enough, my friend. That's not enough. Why are we paying new graduates that just got master's degrees and are in debt $30 an hour? Riddle me that. Um, and the new place, the group practice was more than that. It was also like a very easy commute. It was like a 10-15 minute commute on one train. I didn't have to move trains. It was very easy. Yeah, just a much better environment. And ultimately, I got the job at that practice, and what a phenomenal experience it was. I really cherished my experience there as well. I had a great supervisor, incredibly supportive. Um, like everything was great. Like I connected a lot better with my colleagues. Like it felt more like a community, more like a workplace where we were all in it together versus being in the community mental health clinic. I just felt so not a part of anything. Like I didn't feel tied to the organization or anything. I just felt so alone, really. Um, and so I stayed on at that group practice. Um, and at that point, um, right as soon as I had graduated with my MSW, I got my license pretty immediately. So I was an LMSW, which is why I could keep working with my clients. And then at this group practice, I eventually get my LCSW. I was working there for a bit. The timing was a little off, just because at some point I got pregnant and then I was on maternity leave. And it was during my maternity leave I would have qualified to take my LCSW exam. And there was a part of me that was just like, oh, I could totally be that woman who just like does it all being a new mom. And there's a part of me that felt like I had to do that. And let me tell you, that went away very quickly. And I was like, no, I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna come back from maternity leave. And that's what I did. And then I got my LCSW, I think in May, and I came back from maternity leave December 2023, and I got my LCSW in May, was it? And I had taken the exam and passed I think a couple months prior. It just took time for everything to go through. And then basically what was great about this group practice and my supervisor is he was just like, you can either stay on as a supervisor and you'll get a salary, or go off, start your own practice, and you can take all of your clients with you, which is honestly unheard of, but ultimately best practice for client continuity, for treatment continuity. And that's what I did in July 2024. I started my own, not a group practice. I started my solo practice. Um, I I kind of just kept all the same systems in place. I kept all of my clients. I got credentialed with Headway. Headway did all of my insurance paneling for me. Um, I still work with them. I love them. I totally recommend them. I'll put a link below. It's a referral link. But I totally recommend them. I went with Headway versus Alma. So I was looking at the two different, because they're the same company. They do insurance paneling for therapists. I went with Headway because they were in network with way more insurances that my clients were in network with. So the big one was, I think, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And this stuff may have changed at this point, I'm not sure. But the vast majority of my clients were Blue Cross Blue Shield insurances. And so if I wanted to keep working with all of my clients, I really had to go with Headway because they were the ones that would credential me with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Um, but I would say, like, even if you're in the group practice world, I think going the route of like working with a company like Headway just administratively makes billing and insurance things so much easier. So much easier. I also use them as my EHR. They have all the built-in documents and paperwork for your practice and all those things. You still have to like do your due diligence and like make sure all your things are in place and all that, but it was just it's made my life very easy being in private practice and not having to worry about like the credentialing, because when you credential by yourself, it just takes so much longer. And what I've often heard is that what you get reimbursed from reinsurance is not as good. Um, so Headway, I got credentialed in less than 30 days, and it would just the whole process was just very, very smooth. I'm not over here trying to sell you on it. I'm just this is truly a recommendation because I've been working with them and it's been really, really good. And so I've been in private practice since July 2024. I've had my caseload of private clients I've been able to work with. Most of the clients I'm working with now, I've been working with since the group practice days, which some of them this year would be, come October, it would be 5 years of working with some of them, which is so crazy. It's been so cool though, because some of them I worked with in person in New York City. They saw me through me becoming a mother and me moving to central New York and starting my own practice. Like it's just being a therapist is such a beautiful thing when although my clients they don't like know intimate details about my life, there are some things they kind of have to know. Like when I go on maternity leave or when I go fully remote because I'm moving. Things like that where like they've been a part of my life just as much as I'm a part of theirs, and it's very beautiful. Um, and then, and so I've been in private practice, and I'll do an episode coming up about what's currently going on, and that um my work life will be looking a bit different coming up, but that's kind of where I'm at. Like that was my journey into social work. I think throughout my life there was a lot of things that were very service human oriented. There was a lot of also just like natural values alignment with social work. I have always even when I didn't really have a developed sense of understanding the role of whiteness and white supremacy and colonialism and oppression and all these things, even though I didn't really have that language and that like intricate understanding growing up, um, I still really had these values of being social justice oriented and really caring about um, high need communities and showing up for my community. Like a lot of the work I've done has always been very community based and just very human based. And that was something that made social work such a good fit, is when you hold those core values of just deeply caring about people. Um, I think social work is such a great space for that. Um, so yeah, I honestly don't know if there's much I'd change about my journey. Again, like I'm one of those people where like I don't necessarily know if I would have changed anything. There's a part of me that would have gone to a cheaper grad school program, and that's just because as an adult, being a single mom, I'm and in this economy, I'm feeling the financial strain of having to pay back all of my student loans, which is I have $100,000 in student loans I have to pay back. Um, and I'm going to be so honest and upfront as I've been out of school for almost 6 years now, and I really have not paid back much. And that's just because of honestly like the difficulty in really having like a lower income being a new therapist. It wasn't until I got into private practice and my group practice was good, but like when I got into private practice, that's where I really started to make like good money. Like on average, I was making, and I'm saying all this because I think it's important to be financially transparent with people, but um in private practice, I was making about like on average, this is averaged out, it's different, about like $92 per 45-minute session. Um and again, like you have to take out like 30% for taxes, you have to take out money for expenses and like anything like that. So your take home is going to be less than that, but uh you're just swimming in money. And you know what? That has really it fit my family's needs at the time, but and I'm so happy I went to Columbia. I'm so happy I got to live in New York, and those were all things I'm really grateful for. Do I think it was necessary? No. Am I now living with the consequences of thousands and thousands of dollars of student loan debt? Yes. But as I've also said, there is money in social work. And it's not anything where I'm feeling hopeless about. I think it's going to take a few years to pay off, but I'm also feeling very hopeful that that will happen. It's not anything I'm like stressed about being financially ruined for the rest of my life. Like it's totally doable, and I know, like I said, how many loans I have, and you're probably thinking, Laura, that's insane. But I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot. But again, there's money in social work. Like I'm in a phase where there's a lot of things changing for me and there's more financial stability coming, and I'm seeing a lot of opportunities that are out there that I'm like, this is going to be fine. Like I'm definitely more of the growth abundance mindset where I'm like, I'm also I've put such a focus in paying off other debt in my life where I know what I'm capable of. I know that my student loan debt feels like a lot right now because that also hasn't been something I've put a lot of active effort into. I've kind of just done the bare minimum, like minimum payments. Um, and once I deal with some of these bigger, more pressing debts, and the only thing left I have is student loans, I'll be able to make a more concerted, concentrated, aggressive effort towards that. And so it'll feel a lot better. So yeah, I mean, other than that, in terms of my journey, I don't really think I would change anything. I think my approach to being in social work was honestly just kind of intuitive and go with the flow. And it's so funny because when I say that, I remember being a student, a social work student, really wanting to have a plan. I was very type A, and I was just like, I got to figure out like what exactly I want to do and what path I have to take and what I and this and this and this and this. And those things are important, I guess, but I don't know. I also got a concentration children, youth, and families, and I don't work with children, youth, or families anymore. Like it's all just it's social work is beautiful because it's flexible and you can change course and you're fine. Like you really don't have to have it figured out. I mean, if you're going to be a therapist, it's probably important to like, really concentrate in clinical social work and all of that stuff, which I will say I to clarify at Columbia I got my master's in social work. My overarching thing was, I think, a specialization. I can't remember the terminology. My big thing was clinical social work. And then a like the umbrella underneath that was working with children, youth, and families. So my concentration was still clinical social work. That's why I was able to take classes like motivational interviewing and cognitive behavior therapy, because those were not open to non-clinical social work students, which is a whole other thing. Don't even get me started on the nonsense that social work schools try to do. But I mean, yeah, that's been my journey. I would say if you're considering social work and you feel like really aligned with the social work values, I mean, even check out the NSAW Code of Ethics if you feel aligned with service and social justice and all of those things. Social work could be a really good fit for you. It's also so vast and varied and what you can do with it. There's definitely money in social work. Don't let anyone tell you that there's not. Um, you still want to make like smart, mindful decisions, but ultimately I got to where I am today as a social worker just based on vibes, which is a crazy thing to say, but that's ultimately what happened. Like I just went with the flow of things. I was kind of like, oh, this class is interesting. Oh, I really like this psychology class. This is I took an abnormal psych class and I loved that. And am I working with I went through a stint of wanting to work with the troubled youth, which is not the term that's appropriate. But I got really into like abnormal psychology for children and working with kids with antisocial personality disorder. And there's still a part of me that is very fascinated by that work. That was fueled more so by my when I got into work with like forensic social work, like a lot of that kind of tied together. But I think what's beautiful is you can kind of just go with the flow, like take the class that interests you and see what comes of it. And, if you see a training you really like, try it out or like try the free version or read up on it first. Like you don't have to waste your money on things. Um, be intentional with that. But a lot of my journey was just like what do I vibe with? What interests me? And also just really listening to my body, like when I was in the nursing program and I hated it, my body was literally telling me that I hated it. I didn't want to do anything. I was crying all the time. I was stressed. I was not motivated. I wasn't moving my body. I was like it was all bad. Like I clearly didn't want to be there. Um and so I do think whatever your journey is, if you're a social work student too and you're stressed about like, well, what specifically do I want to pursue? Like what a lot of that stuff you figure out, and as you go through your social work journey, and I know it can be frustrating to hear because it's such vague, annoying advice, but when you're present in your journey and you're listening to like, what do I like right now? Like what's helping me feel fulfilled in my life right now? Is there something that is actually not working in my life? Is there a pivot I want to make right now? Like what's really scratching the itch at this moment in time? And there's a certain level of planning for the future and everything that's necessary in life, but for the most part, I made a lot of the moves I made because I realized things just stopped working and they needed to change, and so I changed them in that moment. And now here I am, and I'm very happy. And I'm very fulfilled, and everything is good. So I hope that was helpful for anyone, like just sharing my own journey, why I became a social worker, how I became a social worker, things that shaped me as a person interested in social work. Again, like there's not much I would change about my journey. I've really appreciated every moment of it. I was surprisingly emotional, reminiscing about my good old college days. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to follow me on Instagram and you can always like comment something there. Honestly, I haven't checked my DMs in quite some time. I'm gonna be so real. You could probably reach me better through my email. So feel free to do that. But yeah, I wish you well. I love social work so much. I think we have some great social workers up and coming. The next generation of social workers is always very exciting. And so yeah, if you enjoyed today's episode, you found it helpful, or you know someone in your life who's considering social work or feeling a little lost and confused about it and you want to share this with them, go ahead, and we will see you next time. Thank you.